Hello, third block, and this is the second segment of your reading homework due May 1st. This is pages 128 to 133. So I'm just going to get started. Don't forget to do your annotations. When they're jabbering away like that, you hear practically no Russian. They might be talking Latvian or Romanian. However, Cesar had all his bags with him, everything in order. So I can, Cesar Markovich lisped Shukov. I'll take off now. Of course, it's Cesar, raising his dark mustache above the top of the newspaper. Tell me, though, who's in front of me and who's behind me? Shukov told him his place in the line, and then with a gentle hint asked, "Do you want me to bring you your supper?" That meant from the mess hall to the barracks in a mess tent. That was strictly against the rules. They'd been made about it. When they caught you, they poured your food out of the mess tent onto the ground and put you in the guardhouse. All the same, food was carried and would go on being carried, because if a Zek has anything to do, he'll never find time to go to the mess hall with the squad. Shukov asked, "Do you want me to bring you your supper?" but murmured to himself, "Surely he won't be stingy. Won't he give me his supper? After all, there's no kasha for supper, only thin stew." "No, no," said Cesar with a smile. "Eat it yourself, Ivan Denisovich." That was just what Shukov was expecting. And now, like a bird on the wing, he darted from the porch and ran out from one zone to the other. The prisoners were scurrying in all directions. There was a time when the camp commandant had issued yet another order. On no account were prisoners to walk about the camp on their own. Wherever possible, a squad was to go intact. But when there could be no business for a whole squad to do at once, at the dispensaries, say, or the latrines, then groups of 4 or 5 were to be formed and a senior appointed to head them and take them there and back in a body. The camp commandant took a very firm stand on that order. No one dared contradict him. The guards picked up solitary prisoners, took down their numbers, yanked them off to the cells, yet the order was a flop. It flopped quietly like many much-touted orders. Someone, say, is sent by for the security boys. Must you have take another 4 or 5 with you, or you have to get your food from the warehouse. Why the hell should I go with you? Someone has a strange idea of going to the CED to read newspapers. Who wants to go with him? And this fellow goes to have his boots mended, another to the drying shed, a third merely from one barracks to another. That's forbidden more strictly than anything else. How can you hold them all back? With that rule of his, the commandant would have robbed them of their last shred of freedom. But it didn't work out, much as he tried, the fat pig. Hurrying along the path, meeting a guard on the way, and to be on the safe side, taking off his hat to him, Shukov ran into the barracks. The place was in an uproar. Someone's bread ration had been swiped during the day, and the poor fellow was shouting at the orderlies, and the orderlies were shouting back. But the 104th corner was empty. Shukov was always thankful if, on returning to camp, he found that his mattress hadn't been turned over, and that the guards hadn't been snooping around. So that's all right. He hurried to his bunk, taking off his coat as he ran. Up with the coat, up with the mittens and the nice bit of blade. He probed the depths of his mattress. The bread was there. Good, he had sewn it in. And out he ran to the mess hall. He reached it without meeting a guard, only a couple of Zeks arguing their bread ration. Outside, the moon shone brighter than ever. The lamps seemed to be paler now. The barracks cast deep shadows. The door to the mess hall lay beyond a broad porch with 4 steps. Now the porch too lay in shadow. But above it, and a small lamp was swaying and creaking dismally in the cold. The light it cast was rainbow-hued from the frost maybe, or the dirt on the glass. The camp commandant had issued yet another strict order. The squads were to enter the mess hall in double file. To this he added, on reaching the steps, they were to stay there and not climb onto the porch. They were to form up in 5s and remain standing until the mess orderly gave them the go-ahead. The post of mess orderly was firmly held by the limper. Because of his lameness, he'd managed to get class as disabled, but he was a hefty son of a blank. He'd gotten himself a birch club, and standing on the porch would hit anyone who came up the steps without his say-so. No, not anyone. He was smart, and could tell, even in the dark, when it was better to let a man alone. Anyone who might give him as good as he got. He hit the down and outs. Once he hit Shukov. He was called an orderly, but looking closer into it, he was a real prince. He palled around with the cooks. Today, all the squads may have turned up together, or there may have been delay in getting things in order, but there's quite a crowd on the porch. Among them was the limper with his assistant. The mess chief himself was there too. They were handling the crowd without guards, the bruisers. The mess chief was a fat pig with a head like a pumpkin and a broad pair of shoulders. He was bursting with energy, and when he walked, he seemed nothing but a lot of jerks with springs for arms and legs. He wore a white lambskin hat without a number on it, finer than any civilian's, and his waistcoat was a lambskin to match with a number on it, true, but hardly bigger than a postage stamp, thanks to Volkovo. He bore no number at all on his back. He respected no one, and all the Zeks were afraid of him. He held the lives of thousands in his hands. Once they tried to beat him up, but all the cooks, a prize bunch of thugs they were, had leaped to his defense. Shukov would be in hot water if the 104th had already gone in. The limper knew everyone by sight, and with his chief present, wouldn't think of letting a man in with the wrong squad. He'd make a point of putting the finger on him. Prisoners had been known to slip in behind the limper's back by climbing over the porch railings. Shukov had done it too, but tonight, under the chief's very nose, that was out of the question. He'd bust you so bad that you'd only have to manage to drag yourself off to the doctor. Get along to the porch and see whether, among all those identical black coats, the 104th was still there. He got there just as men began shoving. What could they do? It would soon be time to turn in, as though they were storming a stronghold. The first step, the second, the third, the fourth. Got there. They poured onto the porch. Stop, you blank, the limper shouted and raised his stick at the men in front. Get back or I'll bash your heads. What can we do about it? They yelled back at him. The men at the back were pushing us. That was true, but those up in front were offering little resistance. They hoped to dash through into the mess hall. The limper put his club across his chest. It might have been a barricade in a street battle, and rushed headlong at the men in the front. His assistant, the trustee, shared the stick with him, and so did the mess chief, who had apparently decided to soil his hands with it. They pushed hard. They had plenty of strength with all that meat in them. The Zeals reeled back. The men in front toppled down onto the men behind them, bowed them over like wheat stalks. You blank limper, we'll fix you, cried a man, and the crowd hiding behind the others. As for the rest, they fell without a word. They got up without a word, as quickly as they could before being stepped on. The steps were clear. The mess chief went back to the porch where the limper stayed on the top. Form 5, blockheads, he shouted. How many times have I told you? I'll let you in when I'm ready. Shukov imagined that he saw Sanka's head right in front of the porch. He felt wildly elated, and using his elbows made an effort to push through to him. But looking at those backs, he knew it was beyond his strength. He wouldn't get through. 27th, the limper called. Go ahead. The 27th bounded up and made a dash for the door, and the rest surged after him. Shukov among them was shoving with all his might. The porch quivered, and the lamp overhead protested shrilly. What again, you blank, the limper shouted in rage. Down came his stick on a shoulder, on a back, pushing the men off, toppling one after another. Again he cleared the steps. From below, Shukov saw Pavlo at the limper's side. It was he who had led the squad to the mess hall. Turin went lower himself by joining in the hula-baloo. 4 or 5's 104th, Pavlo called from the porch. Make way for them, friends. Friends, just see them making the way. Blank them. Let me get through you in front. That's my squad, Shukov grunted, shoving against the back. The man would gladly have done so, but others were squeezing him from every side. The crowd heaved, pushing away so that no one could breathe. To get its due, its lawful stew. Shukov tried something else. He grasped the porch rail on his left, got his arms around a pillar, and heaved himself up. He kicked someone's knee and caught a blow in the ribs, a few curses, but he was through. He planted a foot on the edge of the porch floor, close to the top step, and waited. Some of his pals who were already there gave him a hand. The mess chief walked to the door and looked back. Come on, limper, send in 2 more squads. 104th shouted the limper. Where'd you think you're crawling, blank? He slammed a man from another squad on the back of the neck with his stick. 104th shouted Pablo, leading in his men. Whew, grasped Shukov in the mess hall. And without waiting for Pablo's instructions, he started looking for free trays. The mess hall seemed as usual, with clouds of steam curling in through the door, and the men sitting shoulder to shoulder like seeds in a sunflower. Others pushed their way through the tables, and others were carrying loaded trays. Shukov had grown used to it all over the years, and his sharp eyes had noticed that S-208 had only 5 bowls on the tray he was carrying. This meant that it was the last tray load for his squad. Otherwise, the tray would have been full. He went up to the man and whispered in his ear, After you with that tray. Someone's waiting for it at the counter, I promise. Let him wait, the lazy bastard. They came to an understanding. S-280 carried his tray onto the table and unloaded the bowls. Shukov immediately grabbed it. At that moment, the man it had been promised to ran up and tried to grab it. But he was punier than Shukov. Shukov shoved him off with a tray. What the hell are you pulling for? And threw him against a post. Then, putting the tray under his arm, he trotted off to the serving window. Pavlo was standing in the line there, worried because there was no empty tray. He was delighted to see Shukov. He pushed the man ahead of him, out of the way. Why are you standing there? Can't you see I've got a tray? All right, guys, that's the second segment of your reading homework. You have one more. Don't forget to do it. 3 annotations. God bless you.